Madam Chairman, where not asking the people again is undemocratic, because all the Brexit scenarios on the table bear no resemblance to what was promised at the time of the referendum. So it's legitimate for people who voted leave to say, this is not what I voted for, that's not what I wanted, and to have a chance to reconsider. Not asking the people is sort of saying to the people, you had your say 3 years ago, now you must shut up and accept whatever the government comes up with. That is profoundly undemocratic, and that's one reason why there is this significant shift of opinion in my country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bill Etheridge.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Verhofstadt, for a very concise and detailed report there. Some things came to my attention. I think the first thing to say is, leading on from Madam Chairman's starting, where she's had representations from people in the UK, and then Mr. Corbett talking there about, and quite accurately quoting statistics and figures from latest opinion polls, etc., which will give the impression, and I understand why, that there is a significant sea change of opinion in the United Kingdom. But I will simply point out, as a point of fact, that prior to the referendum, these kind of statements and quotes of figures and opinion polls were also put out there. And during the referendum process, we know what happened and how things changed. And I think that actually what has been very unhelpful to all sides in this process is that there have been representations from people within the UK out to the EU and to national governments within the EU. For example, the French government is having conversations with Mr. Grieve, who's a huge supporter of the EU. These kind of informations that they pass on, I don't think accurately represent everything, and maybe hearing information from everyone would be more helpful. I can assure you I don't want to see another referendum, not because I think the side I support would lose, but it would be catastrophic. It would be an awful, awful state of affairs in the UK, where democracy was seen not to have been honoured the first time round. And talking of catastrophes, Mr. Verhofstadt said that WTO rules, Brexit, would be catastrophic for the UK, and very fairly, I think, he also pointed out the difficulties for the EU. If this is such a case, personally, my vested hope, and I accept in this room I'm probably in a minority of one, but I would like to see a WTO rules Brexit. But if that weren't to be the case, and if it is as catastrophic as we're being told here today, I, with respect, suggest that the EU negotiators maybe need to give a little bit more help to Mrs May and her team, because they are, after all, a team made up of people who support the EU, who campaign to remain, and who are trying to get the softest possible Brexit, far softer than most people in the UK would have expected in these negotiations. So I think, if it is such a catastrophe, maybe you need to back the horse that's more or less on your side. I think the other thing as well, we have to talk about the backstop. That's been discussed ad infinitum, but there is another factor in this. It affects the constitution of the United Kingdom and is currently being legally challenged by Lord Trimble, who was instrumental in the Good Friday Agreement, which all sides believe, obviously, we need to make sure isn't ripped up, as was previously stated. But if one of the main people involved in it questions the backstop's legality, that needs to be considered. I welcome the talk about citizens' rights being respected. The UK has a long history of being one of the leaders in citizens' rights, and I have no doubt that our input into this will be very constructive and helpful, and I think that all sides will be happy with the outcome of that. My final point is that I welcome Mr Verhofstadt's rejection of a long extension. I think he may be quite surprised the number of times I'm welcoming things he said today. But, I do think in all of the exchanges that I see Mr Verhofstadt in, he's at least honest and straight, and that's one thing I admire. I think a long extension is in nobody's interests. I understand the voices who wish to try and rerun the referendum and try and do it again because they didn't get the result they think was right. And I understand all that, but We have got to the point now, after years of negotiation, where the British public have been promised Brexit. And we must make sure, and of course there may be a short delay to get through certain amendments, motions, bureaucracy, but we must make sure that in the short term, Brexit is delivered, whether it be with a deal which is acceptable to all sides, or to WTO standards and rules. It is for the good of all concerned that we get some certainty in our relationship between the UK and our closest friends and allies, and we must get this done, and we must get it done quickly.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Helmut Scholz.
Thank you, Chair, and I also want to thank Guy for the very concrete and detailed briefing where we are. And I want to be very clear. We are here because London is not clear where they want to go. And so we are coming to the 29th, and we have to deal with all the results. So I will not comment all the issues. We have, over the last 2 years, very often spoken about all the aspects which effect it has on the citizens, on the businesses, etc., on the relationship between the future relationship between the United Kingdom and the EU 27. That I don't want to repeat. I want to ask 3 questions. How to deal with that? So if